question for the department. There are almost 15,000 student bed spaces granted planning permission that have not been delivered. In recent weeks, we have been told that the construction is due to start on 1,400 bed spaces on the Groody Road in Limerick. Can I ask, why has this development moved forward while others are stuck and not moving forward, and what has changed?
We're very happy with the announcement from Limerick. We do take an active interest in what's happening on site, and the latest data we have on commencement notice, which is actually when buildings have commenced on site, would indicate that there are 2,735 beds under construction at the moment, excluding the development in Limerick. The 1,400 beds in Limerick have been announced, but as of our last report, they hadn't got a commencement notice in. So we would argue that there's 2,735 excluding the Groody Road one. If you add that on, you're north of 4,000, I think. So there is activity in the market.
And over 4,000, what's holding up the rest and why aren't they moving forward?
Well, what we've seen in recent months is some very fundamental changes to the context, the operating context, the changes in VAT on the construction of apartments, and that includes student accommodation, and also the changes to rent legislation we would expect will mobilise some of these. In addition, the department itself is running a programme called the Higher Education Student Accommodation Programme, and we would look to use that programme to activate ideally some of the existing planning permissions, but also other sites that we might not be aware of, including sites on university land, to get more supply into the market.
That'd be welcome, and hopefully to release some private houses back into the market for renting. Do you think the state should contract with developers to purchase a students' accommodation complex once built and then allow a college to operate same? We effectively do this with local authorities and housing bodies for social housing. Could something similar be looked at as regards students' accommodation?
I might just make a brief comment on your previous remark about private rental. The student accommodation strategy explicitly aims to, its projections are predicated on no increased demand for private rental. In other words, we are very conscious of the pressure on private rental, and the numbers that I quoted earlier on are based on using rent-a-room accommodation, PBSA on campus and PBSA off campus, but not private rental. So we're not projecting an increase in the use of private rental. There is a significant use of private rental already.
Which is welcome.
As regards the contract in the college, we're presently working with the National Development Finance Agency and the Higher Education Authority with a number of universities with a view to looking at on-campus or off-campus developments. As things stand, we've had a market engagement with the sector, with developers in the sector to establish interest, and we would be very much focused on a situation where the developer would lead out, and that would be facilitated by the university. So in terms of new supply of PBSA, the focus is very heavily on developer funded and delivered.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic and good to hear that as well. Final one. Can the state underwrite guaranteed level of long-term future occupancy, we'll say give or take 20, 30 years, whatever the case may be, between the colleges and the developers in order to provide bank and investors with the security that allow them to be funded and constructed? Or is there reasons why this cannot be achieved?
The issue at the heart of your question, Deputy, I think is the borrowing framework and the ability of technological universities to enter into a borrowing or a commitment. As things stand, what are known as traditional universities do have capacity to borrow. Trinity, UCD, UCC, UCG, colleges like that, UL, would all have the capacity to borrow, whereas technological universities don't currently have a borrowing framework. In order to get going with student accommodation, we've introduced a concept which is well established internationally called the nominations agreement. And this is essentially what you described here, where the university would commit to taking a fixed number of beds for a fixed number of years as part of the development of student accommodation. And it's quite right to say that once a developer knows that he has effectively pre-sold a number of the beds, they can go to a bank and get finance, and that certainly helps them with raising finance, and it might even help with the interest rates. The duration of a nominations agreement It remains to be seen when we go to the market what actual duration people would want, but it doesn't tend to be for 20 or 30 years. It would more be likely 5 or 10 years would be the kind of timescale. Generally speaking, what developers want to do is get the thing full and demonstrate that it's operational, and that's where the nominations agreement helps. It also is a commitment on the part of the university, so it's working through all of that is what the programme is doing at the moment.
And this is something that can be achieved, so going forward with it?
Well, it's too early to say. We haven't got to the stage with developers where we've actually tested formally in the market, but we have taken initial soundings. We've met 10 developers and we've spoken to them about the concepts in the strategy, and the feedback we've got is generally positive, yes.
Well, that's good, and thank you very much.
Thank you.